for the kind invitation. I am a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, the Zoffer Chair of Sustainability and Ethics, and I'm also the director for the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. My journey in the corporate responsibility and sustainability space started about a quarter century, 25 years ago, and during this time, I have been researching a variety of issues related to under what conditions consumers and employees reward companies for their corporate responsibility and sustainability initiatives, as well as kind of, what companies need to do today, given the enormities of climate change and inequality and all the other stuff that we're seeing around us, what companies can do to essentially transition from a singular focus on profits to an integrated focus on people, planet, and profit. My PhD was from I should back up and say I was born and brought up in India, and I came to the United States to pursue higher studies. And my PhD was actually in marketing at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. And you might wonder what is a marketing person actually doing in the sustainability space, but there is a story behind that. And I will now try to share my screen and share that quick story with you, and then we shall go ahead with today's talk. So, Julian, is that good? Do you see that? Do you see my screen? All right, great. So I said that I transitioned from kind of how do we sell products to how do we kind of integrate environmental and social concerns into the products we sell and the companies that we manage. And this did not happen completely by accident. So my first job after I graduated from the Wharton School was at Emory University in Atlanta. And whilst I was at Emory University, I met a very interesting person. And this person was the CEO of this company called Ben & Jerry's. So this person's name was Ben Cohen. So he was the Ben of Ben & Jerry's. And Ben & Jerry's, I would submit, has been a socially responsible company. And when I met this gentleman 25 years ago, I mean, it was a smaller company perhaps than what it is today. And Ben Cohen asked me a very, very interesting question. He said, we do a lot of things for the environment. We support the rainforest. We do a lot of things for society. So, we pay our workers a living wage rather than a minimum wage, and we have fair trade certification and so on. So can you help me understand if what we do for the environment and for society, does it actually help us sell ice cream? And so in other words, would people buy Ben & Jerry's ice cream all else equal because of its environmental performance and its social performance? And I found this question very intriguing, and because as marketers, we had always been thinking about how do we increase sales? But nobody at that time, and now I'm going to reveal my age, this was 1995, so precisely 25 years ago. But nobody at that time was looking at environmental attributes and social attributes as possible drivers of sales. So we were all focused on product quality, pricing, promotions, advertising, these kinds of kind of levers to pull to sell more product. So conceptually, the question that he was asking me was, if you look at this 2x2 that I put up here, is like, if I create social value and environmental value, and that's my horizontal axis or the x-axis, does that help us drive business value, which is on the y-axis? So he was really asking me, is there a space on this upper right-hand quadrant which is kind of viable? Can a brand occupy this particular space? And this particular space has actually been my passion for the last 25 years. We can call it strategic corporate responsibility. That's what we were calling this in the early 2000s and till about 2010. And post in the last 10 years, increasingly the sustainability verbiage became more and more common. So now we call it sustainability. But to me, it comes down to this concept of the triple bottom line. So the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit. So I'm working for people and planet on the x-axis, and I'm able to that work. Am I able to drive some metric of business value, and so can I drive profits through this endeavor? So I found this very, very intriguing, and I found this more fulfilling, honestly, than working on research that was kind of, okay, how can we sell more product for the sake of selling more product? And I got to work on this. And if you look at the vertical axis, kind of how is value created essentially from these initiatives? There are essentially two ways via which value is created, and I call this the direct route and the indirect route for creating value. So the direct route is simply kind of, I reduce my costs, or I use less materials and therefore save a precious resource. I mean, if you take a very, very simple example, like, instead of driving to work, I carpool. If I carpool to work, then we are saving, we are saving gasoline, which saves us money, but it's also good for the environment. So, so that's one way that we create value. And the other part is kind of, what do my stakeholders think about the fact that I'm now, kind of taking public transportation, or I'm carpooling to work? If they react positively to that, but in terms of kind of wanting to buy more of my product, or saying positive things about my company or brand, that also creates value. So that's the stakeholder reaction part, and that's what I call indirect. And the direct part is just by taking this action, I'm saving some precious resource, and as well as I'm saving on cost, etc. That's the direct route. So my first book, which was published in 2011, actually dealt with the stakeholder route to kind of maximizing business and social value. It was called Leveraging Corporate Responsibility. And I studied kind of under what conditions do stakeholders actually reward companies for all the things that companies do in the field of corporate responsibility. And the high level answer that I got, or that I will share with you from this research, is that kind of mere engagement is not enough. I mean, there is, in fact, a space, that upper right-hand quadrant that I showed you, where you can do well financially by doing good socially and environmentally, but it's not automatic. It has to be a strategic endeavor, which is kind of tied to the kind of brand you have, to the kind of consumer you have, to the kind of industry and competition that you have. And all of these play a role in determining kind of, whether and how much value you're able to create. Now, as I was doing this research, I realized that, wow, I mean, this is another way to not only do good for the environment, but also do good for society. Why should everybody kind of not want to do these kinds of initiatives and engage in these kinds of strategies? Isn't it fairly straightforward? So if I ask any of you, wouldn't you like lower costs? Wouldn't you like higher revenues? Wouldn't you like more profits, a higher reputation, high employee engagement, competitive advantage? Don't you want to be around for a long time? These are all things that companies covet, right? These are all things that those of you who work in companies covet. So why should everybody not do it? Because I figured out through my research that the only thing you need to do to be able to achieve all of this, you need to embed sustainability. And I'm going to shift to the sustainability language, and I'm going to explain the difference between corporate responsibility and sustainability in a second. But all you need to do is embed this idea of doing good for society and doing good things for the environment into your company's DNA. So you need to look at your business through the lens of sustainability, right? And sounds easy, right? I mean, everybody should be doing that. I mean, it's not that difficult. Well, as I continued my research, I discovered a roadblock. The roadblock is that, the sustainability, simply defined as well-being of our planet and people, is viewed as someone else's problem in most companies. This is someone else's problem, right? And, small companies think it's the big company's problem. Big companies think it's the government's problem. And governments think it's the other country's problem. And this is no accident that the United States actually pulled out of the Paris Accord, because the current administration believes, well, this is somebody else's problem. I mean, it's other countries, let them do this. We need to grow as fast as we can, and so on and so forth. And then even if it is if companies do something, in most companies, it's relegated to a single department. There's a sustainability department. So I've talked to thousands of executives, and asked them this question: hey, how about sustainability? What do you do in this regard? And the refrain is always, well, it's important, but it's someone else's problem. Now, the point is that if it's someone else's problem, and if it's relegated to a single department, sustainability, which in contrast to corporate responsibility, engages the whole organization. It goes from procurement to disposal, and it involves marketing, it involves the supply chain, it involves human resources, it involves everybody in the organization, in contrast to CSR. So by relegating it to a single department, we are under leveraging the power that sustainability actually offers to us. And therefore, the one thing that we have to do to make it everybody's problem is to build this sense of sustainability ownership, which is really what I want to talk to you about, and which is something that I saw in some companies that I worked with quite closely. And I will start with a disclaimer today that the companies that I have worked with for this research are by and large companies. They are public limited companies, because these are the guys who have the biggest footprints, and they employ hundreds of thousands of employees and so on. And these are the most difficult ones to change. Believe you me, small companies can do just as good and just as well. There's nothing preventing them from engaging in this journey that I shall unfold for you. So just bear with me for a few minutes, as you will see from the lessons. Now, I was telling you that not all companies are waiting for someone else to pick up the baton. There are a handful of companies where sustainability is actually everyone's problem. And one of those companies that I studied quite closely is this consumer products company called Unilever. Now, you would know Unilever from its brands, such as Dove, which has the self-esteem campaign, or Knorr, or Purell. I mean, they have so many brands. And what I observed in Unilever by traveling far and wide is that everybody in this company takes ownership of sustainability. From the mailroom to the boardroom, there are no exceptions. And now think of what our world might be if, every company was like that. We would be making so much more progress in terms of reducing carbon emissions, in terms of reducing waste, in terms of, improving employee well-being, community well-being. It would be a very, very different world to live. And so I was like, okay, I want some answers. I mean, why are some companies doing this and some other companies not being able to do this? So in this regard, I have done well over 100 interviews of CEOs, C-suite executives, senior managers, regular employees, factory workers, as I said, in large publicly limited companies, more than 25 multinationals I've studied. And I've visited headquarters, branch offices, factories, geographically very dispersed, from Chile to Madagascar to Shanghai to London to the heartland of India, etc. And I moved to Pittsburgh recently, 3 years ago. Prior to that, I was living in Berlin, Germany for 8 years. And whilst I was in Berlin, I had started something called the Sustainable Business Roundtable, where many companies would come, in fact, to learn this very lesson, how do we embed sustainability into our corporate DNA. So those meetings were also very, very informative for me, and I got quite a few insights from there as well. So what did I learn? The first thing I learned is that in many, many companies, there are these sustainability myths that impede progress. And these myths need to be busted, first and foremost. And what are some of these myths? The first myth is the purpose of business is to maximize profits. No. The purpose of business is to maximize value for all stakeholders. And only by doing that are you going to make money for your shareholders. Companies are getting this wrong. Even today, many companies are getting this wrong. And we will revisit this issue again later in the presentation. That's a myth that needs to be busted. Let's focus on creating value, not just for shareholders, but for all stakeholders. The second myth, which I already busted, is that sustainability is the next iteration of CSR. No, CSR is something that companies do volitionally, and it's okay to relegate CSR to a department who can engage in other parts of the organization. But sustainability is the very survival of the organization. Are you going to be around 100 years from today? You need to kind of engage the entire organization. So don't think of sustainability as CSR 2.0 or 3.0, because that's only going to kind of put you back in time. The third myth I came across was that, whoa, we can bring an Accenture or a McKinsey or someone in change management experts. They can fix sustainability. No, change management alone cannot fix sustainability, because change management deals with profitability again. I mean, how do we increase profits? Whereas sustainability goes to the philosophy of business and asks a very important question of, why do we do what we do? What is our purpose? And when you ask that question, you realize that business exists to serve society, not the other way around. Society does not revolve around business. Business revolves around society and exists to actually serve societal needs. Sustainability is a cost. No, it's not. It's an investment. It's an investment in your future. It's like saying that, paying for college is a cost. No, it's an investment in your child's future. So think of it like that. And the final myth that I came across, and maybe this will resonate with some of you, is like, we are too small to make a difference. I mean, what difference can we make? You know what? Everybody makes a difference. Everybody makes a difference each time you put out the light, each time you decide not to print, each time you decide to take a bus. Everything adds up, which is why you see on my profile there, my book is called Small Actions, Big Difference. I actually do believe in that. And this is what the hidden champions that I have studied actually allowed me to say with confidence, that I will show you examples of small actions that ultimately make a big difference. So nobody is too small to make a difference, even if you have a business with an employee base of 1 or an employee base of 3 or 10 or 100. So how do we build this sense of ownership that I kind of observed in these companies that were doing well in this regard? And I went looking for some literature. So I'm like, okay, I mean, is there something called ownership in the literature? And lo and behold, I mean, there is this whole concept called psychological ownership, which refers to feelings of possessiveness and connection towards an appealing object. It could be a person, it could be a company, or even an idea such as sustainability, kind of, it does not have to be legal, this concept of ownership. And ownership is a very powerful concept. And I'm paraphrasing Jean-Paul Sartre, who said, we are what we have. So it is part of the human condition, and human beings love to own because it helps them satisfy some fundamental drives and motivations. And finally, ownership is an extension of the self. So we care when we care about the things we own, and we have pride of possession, and we like to show that off to other people. And that's our identity. And that's a very powerful lever to tap into. If sustainability becomes part of our identity or part of our company's identity, that's bragging rights for me. And I feel better about myself. And I'll delve deeper into this in a second. So using all this, I came up with this model, which really has kind of 3 parts, if you will, and straightforward. First part, or first phase, is where we incubate this sustainability ownership model. So you have to define the purpose of the company, and you have to define some concrete sustainability goals in this part of the sustainability ownership journey. In the second phase, we launched this program to the entire employee base and beyond. So we've got to entice or seduce our employees and our stakeholders to come aboard the good ship sustainability. Right? And then we have to enable them or empower them to take action. Right? And the final state or phase is called entrench, whereby we make sustainability routine. I do not have to think about integrating environmental concerns into my business decision. I do not have to think to integrate social concerns into my business decision. It becomes routinized, it becomes automatic. And there are a few ways that we can achieve that as well. So in each of these phases, the trick is to give status and prestige to sustainability so that my employees, my consumers, my community members, everybody sees that this is not something that I just say as a rhetoric, but it's a reality in my organization. And I give my stakeholders and my employees the opportunity to gain a deep understanding of the issues and make creative contributions to invest in this sustainability business. And so how does it work? So I'm going to summarize, in the next 5 minutes or so, the main aspects of this model. And if we don't get this first part right, we are not going to get anything else right. And the first part is to define the purpose of the company. What is our purpose? Do we sell cars? Do we make automotive parts? Or are we in the business of providing mobility to people? There is a huge difference between wanting to sell cars and providing mobility, because mobility can be provided in ways other than cars as well. As an electricity company, do we actually just sell electricity? In which case I would want everybody to have very, very poorly insulated homes. Or is it my job to keep people warm or cool? In which case I would want the best insulation on everybody's homes. So how do I see my purpose? Each of you need to ask that question. And you need to inspire epiphanies from the CEO, from your workforce, ask them. And one of my favorite stories here is this company, Enel. It's a large electric utility company. And its CEO told me that he was, a young middle manager in the Middle Eastern desert. And he said, I saw something quite interesting there. We were building a power plant, and there were these trucks coming down the mountain to kind of fuel the plant. And there were these transmission lines going out of the plant, but I didn't know what these transmission lines were going to do. There was no load to feed. So he said, I dug into this a little bit more, and I found that this was a dubious piece of social engineering, this project. The idea was that the company would be building air-conditioned tents in the middle of the desert, and the nomads would come and congregate in these air-conditioned tents and sit down and watch TV. He said the whole idea was ridiculous, because at that moment I realized that the idea or a job of an electricity company is not to foist new habits on people who are not looking for this thing, but it is rather to enable people what they want to do with electricity. There are many, many homes that are not electrified, where students cannot even learn with electricity. And here we are trying to actually impose something on a tribe or on a group of people who haven't even asked for it. So that was his epiphany. I urge all of you to look at a video by Ray Anderson. He is the CEO of a company called Interface, which is a carpet company. And he had an epiphany whereby he realized, and this is on YouTube, he says, I felt like I was a plunderer. I was taking things away from the planet. And I should be put in jail. So that's the kind of thing you need to understand. What is it that you are doing, and why are you doing what are you doing? Next part is you've got to define what's material for your business. Everybody does not need to run after carbon. Carbon might not be material for your business. It might be financial inclusion if you're a bank. So what are the 2-3 concrete goals that you have? And this is a business called materiality analysis. My book has much more detail on all of these kinds of things, but these are important, that you have some concrete goals. Once you're done with this, you're ready to launch your program into the company, like to all your stakeholders, really. And the first part is the seduction part, kind of how do I entice you to come on board? And there are 2 main strategies there. One is to appeal to the head. Hey, this is the smart thing to do because it actually helps you make money. or you appeal to the heart, which is to say, hey, this is the right thing to do. What are your children going to do 50 years down the road if we continue down this path? And companies have successfully used a hybrid of both approaches. So one of the companies I studied was Apple, and the environmental director of Apple, Lisa Jackson, told me, you know, one of the most fun parts of our job is to go into the businesses and tell them, hey, if you can reduce your packaging, you know, material by 5% or 10%, not only will you save money, but you will also save this precious metal. So head as well as heart, and that's always very important. But motivation is not enough. You've got to create ability, because sustainability is not just about putting off lights and printing double-sided. It's such easy stuff. There's complicated science involved in, you know, eco-efficiency analysis and all this kinds of stuff. So we need to train people. We need to invest in management systems that make it easy for people to do their job. So we need to lower the costs for people to act sustainably. You know, effort is a cost that I'm counting. That's a cost. And we need to increase the benefits. So, you know, we need to promote people on the basis of sustainability. We need to give incentives to people on the basis of sustainability. Whatever it is we do, kind of create that atmosphere that this is rewarded in this company, this is valued in this company. And then last but not least, make it everyone's job. I go back to Unilever in this context, and one of the quotes I have in my book is the Unilever's head of sustainability saying, don't make any exceptions. If you make one exception, everybody thinks that they are the exception. So no exceptions. Doing green is part of everybody's day job. And this has to be the philosophy of the company going forward. And the last step in this model is kind of, you know, called entrench or routinize. So for this, you've got to create a culture which you keep fresh, a sustainability culture. How do you do that? Communicate progress. People love to see that they are making a difference. So let them know, hi, do you know that we've reduced waste in half thanks to all the great work you guys have done? Makes a huge difference to communicate that progress. Co-create solutions. Everybody today is yearning for an opportunity to engage in sustainability because they're reading everything in the newspapers, this, that, but then when they come to their workspace, there's no talk, there's only talk of money. And that kind of, you know, it turns them off. So ask them for suggestions, kind of what can we do in the space of sustainability? You will be amazed at how many suggestions you get. And finally, you know, celebrate successes, you know. Take your employees out for a nice dinner. So, okay, today we are going to celebrate what we have achieved in kind of, you know, reducing our footprint or reducing waste or whatever. So there are companies who even celebrate failures. That company NL that I mentioned earlier, they have something called the Best Failure Award. One of the companies, the visual you see is from Marks and Spencer's, and their sustainability is called Plan A because there is no Plan B, or Planet B rather. So we only have one planet. And so Marks and Spencer is a huge retailer available in many, many countries. And, you know, they have Oscar-style red carpet parties, you know, and to celebrate who's gone the extra mile to deliver on sustainability. And I'm not saying that this has to be that pompous. It can just be one beer or whatever, you know, like I said, a dinner or something. I mean, it's the philosophy that's more important than the action, not the scale of the action. The last part of entrench is when we realize that this is not just about our own company, but it's about society at large. So you've got to collaborate with other companies who are facing similar issues, build platforms, you know, join forums, put sustainability in the pre-competitive space. And one example here is palm oil. It's from palm oil creates deforestation, which is very, very essential. I mean, deforestation is not essential, but preventing deforestation is very, very essential for sustainability. The more trees we cut down, the less, you know, the less oxygen we have and the more CO2 we leave back in the air. So a bunch of companies got together and created the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. And there are many, many other initiatives like this, you know, how to don't dump toxins into the water, this, that. So you've got to find kind of who else is working in my space. Can we create some can we create some collaborative platforms to work together? Because we are not competing. Remember, we are not competing on saving the planet. We are not competing on that. We might be competing for who buys our product, but not competing for kind of the sustainability of our planet and our respective companies. So what does it look like in action, this idea of ownership in action? Just two quotes. This gentleman, the chief sustainability officer of a large company, says, some of the great leaps and breakthroughs with sustainability have happened because people across the organization have been inspired to change things themselves without coming to me to ask for permission or talk through the details. They know they're part of the business better than me. So in other words, they are taking ownership. They are not being subservient. They're not like, running everything by me. This is what we need. And the second quote says something similar, but in a more powerful way. An employee who decides that he can make changes to a valve that will save energy or save water, employee who decides to do something differently with the way water flows, et cetera, add all of those up, the executive said, you get a very big difference. So this is the essence of small actions, big difference. Small actions, big difference. No action is small enough not to be done, is the most important point, I guess, of my talk. Because if you scale lots and lots of small actions, you ultimately do get a big difference. And what I try to do now is summarize, 5 years of my life into 20 minutes or so. And so obviously it's just a very, very high level highlights. I would urge you to take a look at the book. Diane asked me to drop a link in the chat, which I will do. I also run this center. As I told you, it's a Center for Sustainable Business. We have sponsors. If anybody is interested in learning more about the center, please write to me. I am, connect on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm also at cb@pitt.edu. But at this point, I have spoken enough, and now maybe I will take some questions, and I will also drop something on the chat. So over to you, Jillian.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sebi. That was really informative and resonated with me, having worked with corporations for over 20 years on corporate social responsibility and sustainability. Before we transition to our next speakers, we have time for one question, and I see Serena Dietrich has posted one. And she says, there are always people within an organization that have views that don't support certain sustainability projects. How do you work through the naysayers?
Well, it's a very good. So the naysayers are like, they are becoming fewer and far between in numbers. I mean, if they're watching now, if somebody is a climate denier, it's extremely difficult to convince that person to. If somebody is a climate denier, and if somebody does not like, does not care about their employees' well-being, is just not a good human being, I would not go after that person. I would go after the 20%. Every organization, and research shows this, that there are 20% of the workforce of any organization is passionate and committed to sustainability to begin with. They could be the millennials, they could be the younger folks. They are the ones to go to first, right? They are your sustainability ambassadors. They are your champions. So seek them out first, call a town hall, call a forum. They will be the first ones to show up, and they are your cheerleaders. So you want to work on the rest of the organization through them. And then there's 20% of any organization that you will not be able to convert. And that's okay. So ultimately, if I don't get everybody, and there are a few kind of bad apples, so to speak, I have to live with that. That's reality. But what I have observed is that as more and more people convert to the side of sustainability because they are influenced by the talk of kind of, hey, what are your children going to do? Or, hey, don't you want to show a better bottom line? I mean, this is going to save you money if you buy this material instead of that material. You will get 80% of the organization. And as more and more people shift to the good side, you will see that others, the previous naysayers, might also shift because Everybody wants to be on the side that's winning. So you need an organizational shift. And sooner or later, you will find that, you have at least most of the organization. And then people will retire, they will leave. Culturally, they may be shamed, in front of others. And they might find it uncomfortable. So I have actually, going back to Unilever, after Paul Pullman took on as CEO, quite a few leaders left because this was not the place for them. And it was made very clear that if this is not something you want to do, this is not the place for you. So that's where, the top brass has to kind of take a stance and say, are we going to build an organization that has these values embedded? Are we going to embed sustainability into our corporate DNA? If so, maybe, Jillian is not, I'm just an example. Maybe Jillian, you don't belong here. Maybe you should look for other options. So there are various ways, but it's a very, very good question.
Okay, don't kick me off the bus just yet.
No,
I'm teasing.
I didn't see any other name I could have picked on.
I get to be the face of the, yes, and it sounds like you're invoking some of the community-based social marketing premises there in how to really capitalize on the early adopters and get them to spread the popularity of those concepts.
Remember the diffusion of innovation, Rogers' diffusion of innovations curve? Yes. It works just as well in this context. Just
Great.
as well in this context.
Well, so just a couple bits of housekeeping before we move on to our next speaker.